Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm JJ the Bearded Bookworm, and today I've got a fall haul slash birthday book haul slash that's it, just tons of books. Now, in preparation for this video, I actually had to go to my last book haul video to figure out exactly what books I bought at that point and what would qualify into this book haul. Now, it is a lot. However, keep in mind, this is for 2 months worth plus birthday. So these are the books that I've bought in August, September, and up to this point in October. Do keep in mind, like, half or more of these books were actually purchased at used bookstores or thrift stores. We got a local thrift store that has like a great pricing on books. Like, the most expensive book is $3.50, and that's for like a big hardcover. Most books are like $1.50 or $2 tops. So yeah, without further ado, we shall get into these books. So first up, this section is like the horror books that I got because my brain, I was going to do what everybody else did and read horror books or thrillers and things like that in October. That didn't work out for a multitudinous of reasons. So, I've got Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. This is obviously a horror retelling of the Jane Austen classic. It's got pictures in it which are frightening. Some of these aren't so much frightening. The one I opened up was two girls laying down next to a deer, so clearly a bad example. But there are definitely like some scary zombie pictures in this book as well. Next is probably the horror classic, Dracula by Bram Stoker. Much like everybody else, again, I was going to be reading this month, and it just didn't work out. Actually, I don't think this was on my list. It got cut because I was going to read Salem's Lot. But I've got it now, and this is amazing. Like, that's a fantastic cover. This is in the Essential Classics collection. All of the books look like this. But I don't know. At some point, I will get to this book as well. Last and not least, we've got zombies, we've got vampires, and we've got Frankenstein. Now, this is one of those books from mandatory high school reading that really stuck out in my mind. I love this book. And what's great is I got this at a thrift store, and this book has many annotations from the previous reader. So maybe when I do read this, I will also be critiquing the previous reader and their comments on the book. So next is yet another classic, especially when I'm at like thrift stores or things like that. If there's a fantasy, sci-fi classic book that I see there, it's almost guaranteed that I'm going to pick it up because I do want to read those eventually. This is no exception. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, another one of those mandatory reading books that I read as a kid. Another one that I enjoyed but didn't really understand. I know I didn't understand this whenever I read it. Ironically, now being a bookworm, bought the book about book banning and book burning and all that. Next is the treasure that I got at my thrift store shopping trips. This book, I've been keeping an eye out, secretly hoping that I would find a copy of it, even going to like half-price books and things like that. Taking a look, not seeing it, realizing now after I have purchased it that I was looking in the completely wrong section. It's not a fantasy book, it's a historical fiction. But as I've talked about many, many, many times, The Last Kingdom is my favorite show currently going on all of television. But I picked up The Last Kingdom at that thrift store. I'm so excited because I don't know when exactly, but I will be reading this at the beginning of the year. My goal is to read historical fiction, and I just think I picked like the wrong types of books So hopefully, especially with my love of the show, when I do pick this up, I'm going to eat it up and have to go get all 16 of these books or whatever they are. Next is an author that has been on my radar for quite a bit of time. I don't remember off the top of my head now. I do believe he actually worked with J.R.R. Tolkien. But that author is Guy Gavriel Kay. Now, if I'm completely off about him working with Tolkien, my apologies. Just, piecing together bits that I heard over the last year and a half or so. But more thrift store finds. Got The Last Light of the Sun, which clearly by the cover is another Viking story. And Tigana, which I think might be his most popular book. I don't know anything about either one of these books, honestly. Just one of those ones where I was like, oh, I recognize this author. He's super popular at the thrift store. And obviously picked them up. Hopefully I do like them. At this point, I'm done getting any more of his books until I have read them and tried them. But we'll see how that goes. So the next batch of books are an author, again, founder of the thrift store, that, from what I understand, they're very solid books. Nothing to super write home about or top any top 10 lists. But fans of his rave about how good his books are consistently. And that is Michael Crichton. Now, Michael Crichton is the author of the likes of Jurassic Park, Andromeda Effect, I believe is what it's called. This sci-fi author from, the 80s and 90s that just really made waves, and a lot of his books have been adapted and whatnot. For whatever reason, my thrift store just had a ton of his books, multiple copies, so it couldn't have just been from one person. So that's what these books are. We got Next, which, from what I understand, involves humans taking DNA from animals to kind of enhance themselves, or correct things like, oh, you have bad eyesight. Let's not just fix your eyes. Let's give you very animal eyes. I believe. Again, it could be completely off because I don't remember exactly, and the description's fairly vague. Next is Prey. This is supposed to be little nanobots that get unleashed on the Earth, or an accident at a lab unleashes these, and they basically are almost like this not apocalyptic, but they're fighting this now techno virus type thing through nanobots that have been unleashed out onto the world. Then we have Timeline, which Timeline takes place in Arizona, my home state, where I currently live as well. So that kind of made the decision for me. Obviously from the title Timeline, there's some time travel involved of, people being able to go back in time and whatnot. So, taking that as well. Then the last of the Crichton books is Pirate Latitudes. Now, I really hope this is actually about pirates and not about people trying to find pirate treasure. I didn't actually read what it was about. I just saw that it was about pirates in some way. So I got suckered in because pirates are amazing. So this next book, I found it while I was doing the Redwall read-along that I did with Taylor over at Made Between the Pages. And I found Hyrule Lane, which in the back of my mind I was going to be getting all of the Redwall books. However, I don't feel like going from the first book to the 16th or 20th or whatever, however many books there are. There's a ton now. This is definitely later in the Redwall storyline as well as publication. So I don't know when I'll actually get to it, but obviously, as you can tell from the cover, we've got a Scottish-looking otter wearing armor and a kilt. So, Redwall is the series of books from when I was a kid that got me into reading, so I absolutely want to have those books available because my oldest daughter is now learning to read, and so I want them available to her as soon as she would possibly want to read them. Next, a word of warning to any bookworms going out trying to get good deals on books. One, don't go to Goodwill on your lunch break and expect to be able to thoroughly look at everything. And if you're in a rush, at least open the book and take a look before you actually make the purchase. I did all of those things wrong. So I found New Spring, the prequel Wheel of Time book. And I was like, sweet, $3.50 or whatever it was. Awesome. Two big issues with this book. One, it's the library edition, and it is an ugly library edition at that. Probably exchanged libraries a couple times or got sold to a yard sale or whatever. So like the library cover part is also pretty nasty. However, like I said, crack open your books because I didn't even look. The spine has been detached. So either I'm getting rid of this or I'm going to do some YouTubing and see if I can figure out how to actually repair the book. And also see if I can get this library lamination cover off and maybe salvage just to have the actual cover, because I think that's actually fairly well preserved. So these next two books are books that were sent to me by Hannah over at Rebellion Publishing. These are arcs for upcoming books. I think one of them is actually out as an ebook, but with everything going on, the actual publishing of it got pushed back. But she sent me out these two books. Pretty excited. Hannah's actually the first publisher representative to send me books, so that was pretty exciting. But the first book we got is Shadow in the Empire of Light. This book is about a girl who does not have magic. She's an orphan, but she's kind of got adopted by like an aunt or something like that who's like the matriarch of this magical family. She's an orphan in the family but does not have magic like everybody else does. The matriarch dies, and then it's just like this intrigue where all the family members are like vying for power and trickery and stuff like that, and so she's kind of forced to figure out what exactly is all going on. The tagline on this, which is pretty awesome, is magic, murder, mayhem, but keep it in the family. So, sounds pretty exciting to me as far as that. Love the mischievous, magical people. Then the second book is Skyward Inn. This is a sci-fi book, but from what I understand, it's not like your typical sci-fi. You know what? I'm just going to read the back of the book because I can't explain this well at all. It says, Skyward Inn, within the high walls of the Western Protectorate, is a place of safety where people come together to tell stories of the time before the war with Kita. But safety from what? Kita surrendered without complaint when Earth invaded. Innkeepers Jem and Isley, veterans from either side, have regrets but few scars. Their peace is disturbed when a visitor known to Isley comes to the inn asking for help, bringing reminders of an unnerving past and triggering an uncertain future. Did humanity really win the war? So, this book comes out in March in the US and the UK. It comes out in March. So these next ones I'm going to go through really quick because I'm not reading them anytime soon. These are my Stephen King books that I've been able to pick up from thrift stores and whatnot. We've got Salem's Lot. That's the first one, the only one that I actually bought retail. Supposed to have read this month, but spoiler, I didn't get to it yet again. I'm sorry. I continue to make promises about Stephen King and reading his books and never get to them. So next month I'm flipping it. Stephen King will be the first book that I read to ensure that that actually gets done. Then we've got Cujo and Bag of Bones. These were given to me by my sister. She got like a Facebook like bulk book buy and found these, and she doesn't have any interest in reading him, so she gave them to me. Then we have The Outsider and Black House. And I don't know hardly anything about any of these books because kind of going in blind as much as possible with each one, other than, obviously the books that I know like Cujo and like The Shining and stuff like that. Alright, these next three are books that I bought from retailers, full price. They're just books I wanted to pick up. A couple of these are sequels to books that I read and loved. And then obviously you'll know the other one. First up is Bloody Rose, the second book in the band. This follows Rose. She's the daughter of one of the band members from Kings of the Wild. And this is about her band of mercenaries. And from what I understand, as emotional as Kings of the Wild was, this is the book that makes people get like very emotional, like crying and whatnot. So I love the first one so much. I've been holding off reading this for a little bit just because I wanted to gather my thoughts and actually do the review, which, by the way, reviews for all the books that I've read are coming. But I love that Nicholas Ames puts so much like music references into his books. Even in this one, he talks about he made a fantastical version of Madison Square Garden for the Mercenary Band's tour. So things like that are really cool if you're aware of them and are paying attention. So next is The Dragon Republic. This is the second book in the Poppy War series. The Poppy War is brutal. From what I understand, this is even more brutal. So originally I had intentions of reading this before November, when The Burning God, the third book, the final book, comes out. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to that, but we will see. If not, I'll be reading it very soon because I want to actually finish series before I move on to new ones. Then we have the most beautiful book that I have purchased in the last couple months, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This book is gorgeous. I've only read like the first 100 pages of the book so far, but it is very, very sci-fi, which is good. Hopefully I enjoy it. I've enjoyed it thus far, but I'm hoping that as it goes on, I'll be able to latch on it. It will be that space opera, that epic sci-fi story. Alright, so I have not been the only one person in this house buying books. My wife Victoria has recently gotten into reading again, and she's been doing some read-alongs and things like that. So she's actually purchased some books for herself for these read-alongs, and some of the books actually crossed over with books that were on my list. So I'm counting them as my book haul because we're married, we share money. First book is Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the first book in a series. This cover is awesome. The main character is a Native American woman. From what I understand, they're monster hunters. She's got powers of some sort. It's like an urban sci-fi fantasy series. I've been intrigued. It's been on my list, but other things have just been higher up on the list. So now that she has it, it's in my house. So I'm going to be reading it eventually, hopefully soon. Next is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I have known nothing about this book other than a ton of booktubers have it on their shelf. I don't know if anybody's actually read it or not. I haven't looked into it. Honestly, until real recently, I looked into what the book was actually about. It's a standalone fantasy with royalty and intrigue and war and everything like that. So it's a chunky book, but it's good because it's a standalone, which you don't see a lot, especially in fantasy anymore. Everybody's trilogies, 5-book series, things like that. So the fact that this is a standalone really helps me want to read this. Next, we have Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This, for the longest time, I thought was a sci-fi fantasy book. It's actually a sci-fi book. It's like a dystopian book. So, really intrigued by that. One thing that's interesting, because Victoria's started reading this, is the main character doesn't have like a very high level of education, and the writing and the prose in this book reflect that. And so, really intrigued by that, because big fan of like different storytelling methods and what those can help convey. So, once again, like I said, I've said this multiple times, these are all books that are on the list that will be read eventually. Probably once the bookshelf is full, which, as Alex says, shit's be filling up. Probably put like a book buying pause. Not banned, because I will break it. I already know that. But really focus and double down on reading the books that I actually own before I purchase more. Let's be honest. Those are all false promises. I do apologize to my books, to my audience. I will probably never stop buying books. Now, next up is 2 books in a trilogy, I believe. My wife picked this up, and heaven help her, she would not shut up about this book. She loved it so much. Constantly, you need to read this book. You would love this book. Multiple times. I lost my wife for a week or 2, or however long it took her to read it. I think it was just a week, but she'd only come up for air from reading this book to tell me that I need to read it. So, the next one is Children of Blood and Bone and its sequel, Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. Hope I said that right. From what I understand, this is very, the magic people, or the people that have magic, were pretty much all killed off. And then their descendants, slowly that magic has been coming back, and the king that actually killed everybody is frightened by them. And the people of this group that has magic, they're like super second class citizens, like very, very low. Like, you can actually get in trouble for being charitable to them or giving them things. So, and then they've got like, their magic comes from scrolls. So from what I understand, I don't know. It's all me like totally listening to my wife, I promise. But the characters in this, from the royalty to the magic users, the new magic users, to like the surrounding people related to them, from what I understand, like the interactions between those characters is just really, really great. Next is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark. I actually started watching the show, not knowing what it was about, and one piece of advice I would say, definitely figure out what that show is about before you just jump into it, especially if you're watching late at night and there's a chance you're going to fall asleep, because the show's weird as crap. And I'm sure the book is that way too. Now that I know what it's about, it makes more sense, but I was like, it's like historical London or historical England, but there's fey creatures, and like the fairy king making deals is like super tricky, like a trickster type of god. Other than that, I don't know anything of what it's about. I honestly thought it was like a type of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of situation. Not the case. The last books that my wife bought that I am claiming as my own as well is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Now, since trying to read The City We Became, which, since reading it, a lot of the criticism is, if you don't know or care about New York like people from New York do, it tends to fall short on you. So I'm going to give it another chance knowing that, because I just have very basic, and that book is chaotic a little bit. And so between constantly getting interrupted, I actually put it down because I just eventually just got completely lost with what was going on. But Angela over at Lit Science Alliance has a video where she talks about how to get into reading N.K. Jemisin's books, because she is regarded as one of the best authors working currently. And one of the recommendations is the Broken Earth trilogy. Now, her explanation actually helped me understand what the heck the book was about. It is a kind of post-apocalyptic world where the first book's called The Fifth Season, and basically what happens is you got spring, summer, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, then the fifth season, which is like the apocalypse. So basically, you're constantly having these apocalyptic events as a cycle in the seasons. And there are people that are super mistrusted, but they're kind of essentially earthbenders. And they basically spend the other 4 seasons prepping the world to try to hold off and prevent as much destruction as possible. Now, the other criticism, I think this is the series. This is told from a second-person perspective. It's either this one or the Inheritance trilogy. I'm not sure which one, but off of that explanation, totally sold me. So this is getting up there on the top of the list. I'm really excited because post-apocalyptic, earthbending sounds fantastic to me. Now, here are the books that I bought for my birthday. Birthday was on the 17th. Now, for my birthday for a month, I've been saying, taking a page out of Ben from Ben's Blurbs book, where I wanted a book for every year that I was turning, or my age, or whatever, which was 30. That did not happen, because, damn, that's expensive. But I cheated a little bit on this, and you'll see why. But I got a ton of books for my birthday. Now, it just so happened that the 8th book in the Unsold series by Will White came out this month. And as part of that, they had a deal going on where you could get the first 7 books for free on Kindle. So I counted that. So I got 7 books. Now, what's awesome about this series, this is a self-published author and a self-published series. And when the 8th book came out, this book was topping the charts of Kindle across the board against all other types of books. So clearly this series is good. So this series, in this world, the series takes place in basically a bunch of different paths people go on throughout their life. But basically they use their souls to connect with like the forces of the world. However, the main character is what's called an unsold. He's forbidden from practicing magic. Now, this big doom is coming, and so now he's forced to kind of make the decision of, well, fine, then I'm going to forge my own path and learn magic. So next up is probably the biggest like rising star on BookTube right now, and that is Jade City and Jade War. This is kind of like a semi-modern fantasy. From what I understand, it takes place kind of like in the 80s-ish. Of that kind of level of like technology and whatnot. But basically, it's fantasy Godfather, where you got 2 main rival gangs, 2 mafia crime families. And basically, they're just vying for power and constantly at battle with one another. But they're fighting for control over Jade. Jade gives their certain people who have like the correct genetic traits to be able to use the power. basically the jade gives them powers, either speed, strength, variety of different powers. And basically, this is essentially just a crime family. So I'm really excited. It's different than your royal typical fantasy. Next is The Black Company by Glenn Cook. Now, everybody likes to praise Joe Abercrombie for all of his grimdark. This guy was doing grimdark far before that. From what I understand, I first heard about this book from Matt Colville and realized that his D&D world takes heavily from this and how their party is set up. Now that I've looked into this more. But essentially, these guys are the mercenary group. They're one of the legendary mercenary groups that have gone back for hundreds of years. They sell their contract to the highest bidder regardless of what those people want to do. They follow the money. So these guys are not good by any means at all. From what I understand, they actually, in the first book especially, they're working for the bad guys. But the good guys are also kind of crappy people too, so it's not that big of a deal. But what's interesting too is all of these books are told by the analyst, which they're kind of like the record keeper, the historians for the group. And so it's all told from their point of view. So there's a lot of storytelling of almost like a journal kind of thing of like, here's the record of what happened here. I'm kind of up in the air trying to decide if I'm going to do this or First Law, or maybe I'll just switch back and forth, read a book of Black Company, read a First Law book, and go back and forth that way. This book has the first 3 novels in it altogether. There's a whole series of these like omnibus editions that have multiple novels in them. I'll probably continue doing it that way because this isn't actually that big, and I like symmetry with my series. Speaking of grimdark, forgot to pull these off in the beginning. I also picked up the First Law trilogy finally. I have started the Blade itself previously. Was listening to it on an audiobook, was borrowing from my brother-in-law. He loves this series, and now everybody loves it on BookTube as well, which is weird that he's not actually more popular in America than he is. But I stopped because I was getting lost trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Like, I know Glocta and Logan Ninefingers, but without reading it and fully like seeing the words, I wasn't able to like take in what was going on as much. Now that I know what it's about, probably will be a little bit easier because I kind of went into it super blind the first time. But again, like the Black Company, a bunch of bad people. Nobody's good in this book, but eventually you find yourself actually rooting for them, from what I understand. So, like I said, probably what I will do is switch back and forth between Black Company and a First Law novel, and just go back and forth because there's actually like a lot more standalones after this trilogy. Kind of rounding out the grimdark, so to speak, we've got Iron Gold. This is the 4th book in the Red Rising series. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite series ever. The first book I still don't like, but I understand the necessity of it. That the what was set up there continues on. And what's interesting is the first 3 books are only from the main character Darrow's perspective. And in this one, you still have first person, but you're seeing it from multiple different points of view as well, which is new with this book. Next is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the first book of the Ancestor. This shares a world with the Book of the Ice, The Girl in the Stars. I read that earlier this year. Loved it. Originally I thought there wasn't a lot of crossover, but apparently the big crossover is that the powers, the magic in both series are essentially the same thing. And so the second book, The Girl in the Mountain, comes out this year. So I want to read this series as well so I can kind of get more information on the magic system, a little bit of the magic. Plus, these are assassin nuns and so badass. This next book was purchased solely on the hype that one man has hyped this book up so much that I bought this book just to see if it lived up to it. And that is Semlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. Now, this book is about a headmaster that loses his new bride is kidnapped, so he goes on this adventure to save her. He must enter into the Tower of Babel, this world where it's all of this scum and villainy and betrayal and everything like that. He basically has to navigate those things to try to get to his wife. Now, Alan over at the Library of Alexandria, this is the hype man. I have never seen a guy more passionate about a book than Alan is about Semlin Ascends. And I guarantee you, in the comments, if he sees this, he'll say, yes! Because every time, that is how he responds to people talking about this book. Also, this book is fairly steampunky, and I haven't read a book like that since the Aeronauts Windless at the beginning of the year. I really want to get back to it. I've actually really enjoyed the setting in that, and obviously it's not the same world or related in any way, other than this is also fairly steampunky as well. So we will see, Alan, if this book actually lives up to the hype, because if not, you and I will have words. Alright, now this last series was purchased very specifically. There was a deal going on for the other edition that I believe was the other edition. However, I wanted a very specific edition of this series, and that is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. Now, I wanted this edition because, as you can see, it's got the full weapon down each spine, and I love that. It's never underestimate the value of a good spine on a book. This whole series is very Norse inspired. It's actually men versus giants in this. They're kind of the big bads. Now, John Gwynne is probably one of my favorite authors already, and I haven't even read one of his books. This guy is awesome. He does Viking reenactments, and from what I understand in the books, his action is done so fluidly, so well done, because probably because of the reenactments, he actually knows how the body movements and things like that, how a battle actually looks. Now, this guy is a workhorse as well. This is a 4-book series. He's got a sequel trilogy to this, and he has a new book coming out in May, I believe. And the man's putting out like a book a year, so dude's solid. Like, I'm sure I'm going to continue to love all of his books. Last and certainly not least is Nightmare by Chad Nicholas. Chad actually sent me the book for a review, and I'm about halfway through it right now, and it is horrifying. This book is my first real dive into horror, really, even in like movies. I'm not a real big horror person, but this book is starting that love for the genre. So there you have it. There is the massive amount of books that I've bought in the last couple months. Like I said, there will probably never be a book haul as big as this one again. Now, I have a question for you. As you can see, my bookshelf is filling up. Now, I need your help. I need to know what books you want me to read and review. So I'm going to have a link down below. It's going to be to like a Google survey type thing. Let me know using that what books you want to see me read and review. Also, while you're at it, don't forget to comment down below. Let me know what you've picked up recently, what you're reading, Be very interested to know what else everybody has been picking up. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not already. I'm JJ the Bearded Bookworm, and I'll see you next time.